All right, friends, it's time to give you loyal listeners a discount on protein powder. You may or may not know, but I launched my very first protein powder 2 years ago. It's a grass-fed beef isolate with only 3 ingredients: grass-fed beef, either organic cacao or organic vanilla, and organic monk fruit. Now, if you don't want any of the added flavor and sweeteners, you can also just get unflavored. And no matter what flavor you choose, you're getting over 23 grams of protein per scoop, which is going to keep you full and satisfied between meals. I love starting my day with a Fab4 smoothie and breaking my fast with that much protein. It makes a serious difference in my cravings and blood sugar balance the rest of the day, and I've seen it with my clients as well. Now, I never thought I'd own a product company, but when I got pregnant with Sebastian, I realized the majority of protein powders were chemically extracted or enzymatically extracted, and I wanted to use heat and water only. I wanted minimal ingredients because we don't need those emulsifiers, fillers, or added vitamins, minerals, and probiotics. All of those additions increase the chances that it's not going to work for your body, whether it be bloating, digestion issues. I just wanted pure, clean protein to keep you full and satisfied so you could build the most delicious Fab4 smoothie. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of the flavor. If you take a look at our reviews on Amazon, you'll see 5-star reviews for flavor. And that is key, because if you don't love your Fab4 smoothie and you don't love drinking your protein powder, you're not going to do it. It won't become a habit, and it's consistency that outpaces everything. So if you're here and you're listening and you want to give our protein powder a try, use the code podcast5 for $5 off your order. And let me know if you love it. My favorite ways to apply this protein powder is in my Fab4 smoothie, making freezer fudge, making chocolate milk, making hot chocolate, and throwing the unflavored into all my kids' baked goods. So let me know how you use it. Let me know if you love it, and share this podcast deal with your friends. Today's guest is Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar. He's a best-selling author and lecturer. He taught 2 of the largest classes in Harvard University's history, positive psychology and the psychology of leadership. Today, Tal consults and lectures around the world to executives in multinational corporations, the general public, and at-risk populations. The topics he lectures on include leadership, happiness, education, innovation, ethics, self-esteem, resilience, goal setting, and mindfulness. He is the founder of the Happiness Studies Academy, an online program that provides the knowledge and the tools to generate happiness for individuals and school communities. I loved everything that Tal had to say, and I'm so excited for you guys to tune into this episode. Tal, thank you so much for joining me today. I am so excited about today's podcast, and I can't thank you enough for your time.
Thank you, Kelly. Looking forward to it.
I think everyone wants to know what you know when it comes to happiness. You have taught the incredibly popular courses at Harvard called Positive Psychology and Psychology of Leadership. You have an online course called the Happiness Studies Academy, and you've written a number of books on happiness. So I think we should start with the basics. What is happiness?
Yeah, there are many definitions of happiness, and many people, in fact, have given up on it and say, well, it's a bit like beauty. You can't define it, but you know it when you see it. Though I do think it's important to define happiness so that we can better pursue and ultimately attain it. So my definition, not the only one, but my definition is that happiness comprises 5 elements. They are the spiritual, the physical, the intellectual, the relational, and the emotional. To make it easier to remember, they also make up the acronym SPIRE: spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional. Each of these elements is important for happiness, though, of course, we don't need to and probably can't pursue them all simultaneously. But they're important to have in our lives.
I love that. I love the holistic approach that you're taking to happiness. There are so many aspects to it, and all of them can affect how we feel. In some of the courses that you've taught and using the acronym SPIRE, how could someone take each one of those elements and review whether they have happiness in that space?
Right. So let's break them down, these elements. So let's begin with spiritual. Spiritual, of course, we can find in religion, but not only. Spirituality is about finding a sense of meaning and purpose in life. It's about being present in the here and now. So mindfulness is an exercise in spiritual well-being. That's spiritual. Then we have physical well-being, and that's about nutrition and exercise and sleep and touch. The acronym NEST. By the way, I love acronyms, so I may throw
I like
a
it.
few more into the mix. Obviously, food contributes a great deal to our happiness, both the quality and the quantity. Exercise, there's research showing that regular physical exercise is equivalent in its impact to our most powerful psychiatric medication. Then, of course, sleep recovery is important, and so is touch. And so that's the physical well-being. Then there's intellectual well-being. Kelly, one of the studies I found most intriguing that came out recently is that curiosity, asking questions, having an open mind actually contributes not just to our happiness, but also to longevity. So it makes us live longer. So it's good to ask questions. And then there is relational well-being, number one predictor of happiness, quality time we spend with people we care about and who care about us. Relationship is also a relationship with ourselves. Of course, that's all about self-confidence, self-esteem. And then emotional well-being, how do we deal with painful emotions and how do we cultivate more pleasurable ones?
Well, I feel like if we were to look at all of these at one time, it would be overwhelming to try to find happiness in all of these spaces. What do you recommend if someone is looking at SPIRE and saying, okay, I know I need to work on my spirituality, I need to work on the physical, my intellectual, relational, and emotional health, cultivate happiness, but I don't know where to start. Is there an order of operations here?
Yeah, there is actually an order of operations, and the order obviously depends on the individual. And I would start with what's easiest, the lowest hanging fruit, so to speak. I'll give you an example from just physical exercise. People ask me, okay, so what's the best exercise? And I said, the question is, what's the best exercise for you? It's what's most fun. It's what you're most likely to persist with. And the same with the other elements of SPIRE. If it's easiest for you to introduce more quality time with your loved ones, then so be it. That should be your entry point into the SPIRE. If it's, it's easy for me to introduce 5 minutes of walking a day, then do that. The key here is small changes and consistency. Small changes and consistency. So rather, if you want to start meditation, rather than going on a 10-day retreat, which is great, by the way, but rather than doing that, it's better to, spend 3 minutes a day in mindfulness, being present.
I love it. It seems like it would take a lot of willpower, but if you're breaking it up into small chunks of time or small habits, it seems like it may be more attainable. And the lowest hanging fruit, that's what I'm about. It's building those habits one by one. What do you think from your perspective as an expert, the research tells us, how do we get consistent? Is it willpower?
Yeah, so relying on willpower is probably not going to get us very far. If it could, then we'd all have all those New Year's resolution lists checked, and we don't. And the reason is because we rely too much on willpower. What we need to rely on are rituals, or if we had to be more specific, we'd look at what I've come to call the 3 R's of change. Another acronym. Here we go. The 3 R's of change are reminders, repetition, and rituals. I'd like to elaborate on it because I think this is probably the most important aspect of learning to become happier. When it comes to bringing about change, it turns out that philosophy, by and large, had it wrong, and theology had it right. So Socrates, considered the father of Western philosophy, said that to know the good is to do the good. To know the good is to do the good. Well, Socrates was very smart, obviously, but in this case, he was wrong. Not a little wrong, but very wrong. Knowing the good is not enough for us to be doing the good. Because, we know, for instance, that we should be grateful and appreciative. of the good things that we have in life. And yet most people, most of the time, don't do that. Actually take the good things in their lives for granted. We know that we should always be attentive and empathic and kind and generous. And, we all fall short of that at times. We all know what we should and shouldn't eat. And yet very few of us actually adhere to that knowledge. Knowing is not enough. Philosophers, not all, but many philosophers had it wrong there. In contrast, in religion, theologians understood that to bring about change, knowledge is not enough. Yes, it's the first step, of course, but it's only a tiny step in a much longer 1,000-mile journey. What we do need are the reminders. That's why, for example, in religion, people have prayers every day, or they have holy days that are consistent, year in and year out, or month in and month out, or week in and week out. Why? In order to remind the individual or the community of the important things. And then there is repetition over and over and over again. And after you have reminders, repetition, that's when it's ritualized. That's when neural pathways are created in our brain. That's when a behavior or a thought or a feeling becomes a habit, literally second nature, part of our neural network. And this is the only way to bring about lasting change, whether we want to exercise more regularly or eat more healthfully or be more accepting of our emotions and other people.
I love it. What does the research tell us in regards to the length of time it takes for reminders and repetition to become ritual?
So many people today talk about the 21 days. And the source actually of the 21 days is the father of North American psychology, William James, who said that it takes 21 days to create a habit. There's been a lot of research since using apparatus that he didn't have access to, such as brain scans. And today we know that after as little as 2 weeks, so 14 repetitions, we can already see, in some cases, some neural change. A good rule of thumb would be 30 repetitions. That's when it begins to become easier. It, of course, depends on the kind of habit that we're trying to cultivate and of the kind of habits that we're trying to get rid of. Because, for instance, I'm trying to get into the habit of writing every morning, which was one of the habits that I cultivated over the years. It's one thing if I try to cultivate it from point zero, when in the mornings I would, do nothing in particular, versus if every morning I would wake up and check the news. And that was the habit that I cultivated. So I would first have to get rid of one habit and institute an alternative one. And that is more difficult. Eating healthfully is more difficult if I'm already in the habit of, say, having, 3 pieces of chocolate every day, if that is a ritual for me. So do I have to overcome a negative habit and then institute a positive one? That will take longer than just 30 repetitions.
So as part of the process, identifying these negative habits, and how do you suggest someone get rid of a negative habit before implementing a positive one?
Yeah, so the first thing, and this is work by Carol Dweck from Stanford on mindsets, and she shows that just knowing about the way neural pathways work actually makes us more likely to be able to change. So just knowing about the process of change can help. So what does the process of change look like? In our brains, we have neural pathways. Pathways are like rivers, and water flows through rivers, behavior flows through neural pathways. And when I talk about behavior, I don't just mean physical behavior, I also mean thoughts and feelings. And the more behavior or thoughts or feelings flow through a pathway, the larger it becomes, the more it's reinforced, the more likely it is then to happen again. So Ralph Waldo Emerson said that below every deep, a lower deep opens. Meaning that if we have a bad habit and we do something negative, the more we do that negative, the more we're likely to do that again and again. The same for positive habits. They reinforce themselves. And these neural pathways are self-reinforcing. Now, if we want to stop a neural pathway, we can't eradicate it, eliminate it. Just like in nature, you can't really eliminate a river. But once water stops flowing through it, or once less water flows through it, it closes up. It becomes weaker. It becomes it's covered up by more and more sand over time. You still see remnants of it, even millions of years after it was created, but it's not as dominant as it was before. Karin Horney, the psychologist who was a student of Freud, said, we never get rid of our neuroses. They only weaken. So we never get rid of habits, but they weaken. So my habit and it was a real habit of, checking the news every morning, first thing when I woke up in the morning, and, spending half hour to an hour and a half on it, it's still there. I don't do it now, and it's much easier for me to resist. And it's much easier for me because I have an alternative habit, which is sit down in front of my computer and write. So it's weakening old habits, the negative habits, and strengthening new positive habits. That's the process of change.
I love it. So it was almost simultaneous in allowing for this new habit to be created and the old habit to go by the wayside.
Yeah, it is simultaneous. And it's also important that we give ourselves leeway, that failure is part of the process. In fact, there is research showing that people who try to change their habits, most of the research is on physical habits, whether it's eating, whether it's exercising, that it takes on average about 5 failures before we succeed. So despair not. This is why when I talk about starting an exercise regime, I always say, and if you don't succeed the first time, don't worry about it. Go do it the day after, or if you skip a day, it's okay. Because one of the tendencies of especially perfectionists is to, as soon as they miss one exercise regime, or as soon as they break their diet, then, all hell breaks loose. And, it's an all or nothing proposition. That's not the nature of change. Nature of change is bit by bit, 2 steps forward, 1 back.
I love that. I feel like you're preaching to the choir. It is so much of what I see in my practice. And it's those who are resilient and get back up. It's like it's that famous quote, like to be faster at failing, like fail faster, because then you're going to get over that hump. Can you talk about resilience in cultivating happiness and how that's important and part of it?
Sure. But before I do, Kelly, though, I have to just respond to what you said about, what you teach about failing faster. So a great analogy or a parallel process, you can find the work of Mingyur Rinpoche, who's a Vietnamese Tibetan meditation teacher. And he talks about meditation. He says, look, meditation is not about maintaining focus. Meditation is about returning to focus. And he talks about the importance of having oops moments. And oops moments are, oops, I just lost my concentration and I'm going back. And oops, I lost it again and I'm going back. And this idea, this metaphor of, the oops moment, I think is so critical for anything that we want to introduce, any habit, healthy habit that we want to introduce. Okay, oops, I had a chocolate bar. It's okay. I'm going back to my health regime. Oops, I missed a day of exercise. That's okay. Tomorrow's another day. And through that, over time, we cultivate healthy habits in a healthy way, which is also very much related, Kelly, to resilience, to how do we cultivate strength? If you think about it, you go to the gym and you lift weights, and if there is zero resistance, then you won't develop any muscle. So you need resistance, you need difficulties, you need hardships, you need challenges. The same in life. We need psychological challenges. We need to encounter difficulties and hardships, and that's how we cultivate resilience. There are, unfortunately, no shortcuts. We haven't found, and I hope we never will find, a resilience pill. We need to go through the motion, the emotion, and sometimes the commotion in order to cultivate resilience. You look at research on the great leaders. They are inevitably the ones who have been through a great deal of hardships and difficulties. You look at people who achieved the most, who are at the highest level of psychological development. There are people who experienced hardships inevitably. There are no shortcuts, unfortunately. One of the sound bites that I repeat over and over again to myself, to my kids, to my clients and students is learn to fail or fail to learn.
We're gonna have to use that MP4 right there for the promo. It is so true, because that's all we want. I mean, you said it earlier, the longevity is cultivated, or, supported by curiosity. Like, if you're learning, you're curious about learning, and curious about growth, it gives you purpose, and it makes you excited to get up every day. And I love that. I mean, I have 2 young boys, and I think about what the gravity of being their parent and allowing them the opportunity to learn and to grow and to fail and to fall, and trying not to get in their way so that they can live happier lives no matter what. So what advice would you have for parents listening, or for people who went through hardship in childhood? What are some steps that we can do to support these young minds to be resilient, to be happy, to go through these emotions?
Yeah. To my mind, arguably the greatest educator in human history, as far as we know, is Maria Montessori. And Maria Montessori said that we shouldn't do for the child what the child can do for him or herself. And essentially what she was saying was, let them fail, let them struggle. Now, if they can't manage, if it's, of course, dangerous, then that's what parents are for. But short of that, let them struggle, let them go through difficulties and hardships. Kelly, I have to share a story with you, which for me was a definitive experience as a parent. So we have 3 children, and our eldest child, who's almost 17, and about twice my height right now, is when he was when he was 3 years old and half my height, we took him back from daycare. My wife and I, Tommy. At that time, we lived on the 10th floor in an apartment building, and we were walking into the building, and David had a doll then, a little Superman doll, and he really loved that doll. He would carry it with him everywhere. At night, it would sleep on his pillow right next to him. So we were walking home, from daycare. My wife and I are chatting, and he's chatting too with Superman. And we walk into the elevator. We go up to the 10th floor, and we get out. And as he gets out, Superman drops. Now, this Superman can't fly, surprisingly. So he falls right into the pier all the way down, and not even mommy and daddy can get him.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing. Because I just know what you're going through.
Yeah,
as a parent.
In retrospect, it is funny. Then it wasn't.
Yeah.
So he begins to bawl. I mean, he's crying. His favorite toy in the whole world. And I'm about to open my mouth. And before I open my mouth, Tommy puts her hand on my hand, stopping me. Now, as usual, she knows what I'm about to say before I even say it. Now, what I'm about to say is, David, sweetie, don't worry. I'll get you another doll. I'll get you another 100 dolls if you want. Not a problem. She stops me. We walk into the house. David runs to his room, continues to cry. And I say to my wife, Tommy, listen to him. Why not? And she says to me the following sentence. She says, Tal, do not deprive David of the opportunity to learn to deal with loss. Do not deprive David of the opportunity to learn to deal with hardship. It's a sentence that's been a guide to me. Now, I knew the theory, but, theory aside, my boy's crying. And it's so important. Easier said than done, but it's so important to do that with our children, because that's how they learn. Again, if we send them to the gym of life without having to lift any weights, with no resistance, they will not grow stronger.
Wow, that is so powerful. I'm going to take that with me throughout all of parenting. And it our innate response is to protect them and to fix it and to buy another doll to tell them it'd be okay that you get to the bottom of that elevator shaft and get that doll back. But that is that right there is the lesson that he's going to be okay and hard things happen. And I'm sure you've set him up for more success than a number of us who are enabling our children and fixing everything for them. It's not service to our children. Wow.
Yeah, Sunia Luthar, originally from India, now teaching at Columbia University, has done research illustrating the underprivilege of privilege and showing that so many children who are raised in privileged homes, wealthy, successful, supportive, they grow up with many psychological issues that hitherto we have seen just in the underprivileged. Why? Because their parents intervene too much. Why? Because they can. And it's unhealthy, unfortunately.
Definitely. Looking back on my childhood, I do feel I was comfortable, but it wasn't a silver spoon. I had to work for things. I had to fail. And I want to continue that with my children, absolutely. And hearing that story and knowing even just with some of the clientele that I work with and their children, I do see that. I see stress, anxiety, depression at such young ages. And I'm curious, looking at, coming out of the pandemic and seeing depression and mental health struggles on the rise, how can we be supportive of our families and our community and continue to cultivate happiness no matter what, as you say in your book title?
So let me share a few very short, tips, so to speak, about dealing with hardship, and then I want to go into more depth into one particular issue. So the easy ones are, we need to exercise. With my kids, for instance, they've been on Zoom for the past over a year. They've just gone back to school now. During that year, and even before, I never asked them about how they're doing in school. I don't look at their report cards, and they know it. If they want to show me, they show me. If there's a problem, the teacher will call. And the teacher has called once in a while over the years, and that's okay. But I always ask them, always, about exercise. I always make sure that they get their, whether it's the basketball, the dance, or the walk, or the running around, they have to get it, because I know how important that is for physical development and psychological development. Now, during difficult times, exercise is even more important than it is normally. So exercise, movement, even if you're, quarantined or, can't go to your favorite gym, no excuse. Beyond exercise, it's spending time with people we care about and who care about us, and as much as possible in person rather than virtual. And in this context, and here is where I want to elaborate a little bit. There was research done back in the 1970s by Robert Greenleaf. Robert Greenleaf at the time was one of the great organizational psychologists. And he wanted to understand what is unique to the greatest leaders in history. And he looked at religious leaders, and he looked at political leaders, and he looked at business leaders, community leaders. And he identified that the greatest leaders see themselves as servants. And he coined the term servant leadership. For example, he looked in the Bible, Moses, for instance. When was Moses picked by God to lead? When God saw Moses run after a lamb who ran away from the flock, and Moses picked the lamb up and took him back, and God said, just like Moses took care of the flock, he'll take care of my people. The Christian Bible, Jesus came to earth to serve humanity. Fast forward 20th century, Nelson Mandela, when he came out of prison, he spent 27 years in prison. Right? 27 years. He had some time to think about his, opening remarks, so to speak. All the cameras of the world are on him. What does he say? I am your servant. Nelson Mandela. You look at Anita Roddick, the business leader whom I admire most. She's the founder of The Body Shop. You read her book, Business as Unusual. It's a book that I sign in my class. What do you read? Servant of her employees, servant of customers, servant of Mother Earth. Leader as servant. Here is the interesting thing. The most important characteristic of servant leaders, the single most important characteristic of servant leaders, their ability to listen. Not to give rousing speeches, not charisma, not strategic thinking, not being the great visionary, the ability to listen. Now, this is the number one characteristic of extraordinary leaders. We are living through extraordinary times now. We need extraordinary leaders, whether it's in our workplaces, whether it's in our communities, whether it's in our homes. That's what our children need more than anything else. That's what we as partners, as friends, as family members need to do most and to benefit from most, to listen and to be listened to.
Wow. I do think it's one of the greatest gifts when you have someone's presence in their ear and they listen just fully focused on what you're saying. Is this something that is teachable? Is this something we're teaching to our children and teaching to our employees and we can learn as leaders?
The answer is absolutely yes. Going back to the neural pathways, there are neural pathways associated with listening, just like there are neural pathways associated with playing piano. And it's a practice that makes excellent.
Wow. Well, I'm so glad I'm a podcaster. Practicing that. I'd like to circle back to something you said a few minutes ago, that you don't look at your kids' report cards and you wait for the teachers to call. I'd love to know the psychology behind that.
Abraham Maslow said that the ideal school would be a school devoid of grades. I partially agree, because it's not right for everyone. There are some people who need grades. There are some people for whom it is actually helpful. But in an ideal world, what we'd like to see is more intrinsic rather than extrinsic motivation. In our world, there is such an emphasis on the extrinsic. Everything from grades to the school you get into, to the college you get in, to the job you get, to the amount of money or house you have and car you drive. There is so much emphasis on the extrinsic that I strongly feel that there needs to be a counterbalancing act. So rather than reinforce it and say, to my kids, yeah, I too am interested in grades. I too want to know which college you'll get into. I actually ignore it. To counterbalance the obsession, and I'm not using this word lightly, the obsession with grades, with, schools, with colleges, to counterbalance it. And because I really know that it's not important for happiness. Ultimately, I want my kids to be happy. And again, not happy in the, don't worry, be happy, or, just smile all the time and, go to the beach and have fun. In the deep sense, spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional sense. That's the most important thing for me. And I think for most, if not all parents. And I know that if they get into a top college, or if they get the most prestigious job, or become very wealthy, that will not affect their happiness. What will affect their happiness? If they cultivate healthy relationships now and in the future. What will affect their happiness? If they have good habits in terms of nutrition, in terms of exercise. If they're kind and generous, if they find meaning and purpose in what they do, whether a million people know about it or 2 people know about what they accomplish. So these are the important things, and these are the things that I want to focus on, not because the other things are not important, but other people are doing that just fine, and actually too fine for my liking. There's too much emphasis on the extrinsic.
Absolutely. And we're seeing the focus on that. I mean, we're even seeing it in social media, and the likes that these kids are getting, and the way the world is telling you, if you're happy or if you're good enough. Or what recommendations do you have when it comes to, because I know you said breaking habits are just as important as cultivating habits or rituals. How do you approach this social media world with your kids and the recommendations you're making to your students, both, at Harvard and through your academy?
Yeah. So look, the number one addiction today in the world is no longer gambling or alcohol or drugs. Number one addiction in the world today is the screen. And specifically, it's social media, pornography, and games. These things are hurting our society. They're hurting adults and they're hurting children, and more children at a younger and younger age. And what we need to do is not eliminate technology. There are many benefits. I mean, we are speaking now thanks to technology. You know, I can be in touch with my parents who are 1,000 miles away, day in and day out, thanks to technology. So it's a great thing. However, in moderation, as Aristotle told us 2,500 years ago. As we know about just about any area, I mean, your area of nutrition, moderation before all things. You look at the blue zones, people who live the longest, moderation in eating, and the same with social media. And that means we need to set boundaries, because there are very, very smart people working day in and day out, trying to ensure that our children and us as adults are addicted, spend as much time as we can in front of the screen, because they, as you know, they get paid for eyeballs. So we need to counter that by very, very clear boundaries. And my kids have those boundaries. Now, in addition to creating those boundaries, we need to create alternative habits, alternative rituals, which is why I'm such a big proponent of sports. You know, when they are out in the field, not only are they not on the screen at that time, they're also cultivating relationships. They're also improving their health. And most importantly, they're having fun. So emphasizing sports, activities, social activities is so important. Now, the reason why it's important to set boundaries, because taking off is more difficult when it comes to sports, for instance, because it takes more energy to put your gear on, to go to a field, whereas the screen is in your pocket. You can just take it out any minute. It's so accessible, it's so easy. And once you're there, you're hooked. So we need to create the conditions for our children to go out, to play. And to do that, we need to also say no.
I love that, because when I think about all my childhood memories, the place where I created the strongest relationships was on the soccer field. The times when I had the most fun was on soccer tournaments with my parents and my teammates, away for the weekend, playing as many games as my little body could play. Like, those are beautiful memories where I truly, there was camaraderie, and it's really special. To this day, those were my bridesmaids.
And think about the things that you learn through sports. You learn to interact, you learn to lose, you learn empathy, you learn to work hard, you learn dignity, you learn to listen, to lead, to follow. I mean, all the lessons. I'm thinking of writing a book at some point. All I needed to know, I learned on the squash court. Playing squash, just like the book, All I Needed to Know, I learned in kindergarten.
Right. It's true. Well, let's talk about what people can learn from you, because you've written a number of books, and not everyone can go to Harvard, but you created something called the Happiness Studies Academy. Can we talk a little bit about that and what people can learn from that?
Yes. So we created the Happiness Studies Academy for two reasons. One, to help our students become happier. Two, to help our students help others become happier. Now, why is that important? It's important for the obvious reason that we all want to be happier, and we all want the people we care about to be happier too. Beyond that, though, there's a lot of research showing that if you increase your levels of well-being, even by a little bit, you become more creative, more innovative, more productive, more engaged, more motivated, more successful. You become healthier. Your relationships improve. So there are all these very nice side effects to becoming happier, which is why, we have, as our students, we have, parents, who want to parent better, and we have coaches, and we have therapists, and we have business people, and we have consultants, and doctors and lawyers, and you name it. Because in every field, and again, there is plenty of research on that in different fields, in every field, increasing levels of well-being contributes to performance as well as to satisfaction.
I love it. So does the curriculum follow SPIRE and your work in cultivating happiness in all aspects of life?
Yes. So the curriculum follows the SPIRE methodology, and it is intensely practical. So we don't teach anything that is just theoretically interesting. We teach things that you can apply, the same day, whether it's at home or at work. So we have, tools, techniques, tips that are all grounded in science. So this is the science of happiness, which is a relatively new science, and yet draws on very deep historical roots from, Aristotle, the religious traditions, literature, as well as from neuroscience. So we bring it all together.
I love that. So other than cultivating an exercise protocol, are there any practical tips that you can leave our audience with today that they can start incorporating in their daily life?
Sure. So the first thing that, actually, let me go through the SPIRE, and for each one of the SPIRE elements, talk about one exercise.
I love that.
That is relatively easy to apply. So when it comes to spiritual well-being, if you're not meditating already, start meditating. Now, what I mean by meditation is not necessarily sitting down, lotus position and focusing on the breath going in and out. Meditation is present moment awareness. And again, go for the lowest hanging fruit. If the lowest hanging fruit for you is listening to music, then listen to music mindfully. Eyes closed, sitting down or lying down, and just listen to the song or to the melody. If prayer is your lowest hanging fruit, then pray with intention, focusing on the word. If listening is something you want to cultivate, then listen mindfully. That is a form of meditation. So introduce more mindfulness into your life, and small changes make a big difference if applied consistently. So even 3 minutes, 5 minutes can go a long way. Then physical well-being. When it comes to physical well-being, if you're not exercising already, start exercising, and that could be walking 5 minutes a day. It could be dancing 3 times a week, or whatever is most fun and enjoyable for you. When it comes to nutrition, I will provide the tip that you're probably familiar with from the people of Okinawa. And in the Blue Zones, Dan Buettner talks about how before every meal, the people of Okinawa pray to their ancestors, and they ask them to give them the strength to eat until they're 80% full. Eat until you're 80% full. Again, moderation in all things. This reminds me, Kali, I have to share this. So my brother-in-law works with me, and he, he's heard me speak, hundreds of times. So he knows that I talk about the 80% full idea. So he and my sister, his wife, celebrate their 10th anniversary. They go to a beautiful restaurant. And subsequently, he calls me and he said, Tal, your sister and I, we went to this amazing restaurant. And you know what? I did exactly what you told us to do. I ate until I'm 180% full. So not 180, it's 80. I'm just emphasizing that. Okay. Yeah, so
I was just going to say, I like that. I'm so sorry to interject, but what you did is you created happiness by bringing the people that you want to be around the most into your work life. That's really beautiful.
Number one predictor of happiness, quality time we spend with people we care about and who care about us. And with the Happiness Studies Academy, the most important thing for us to do is to create a community. And it's more challenging, more difficult to do, during the pandemic. But we still meet, and we meet regularly, whether it's through Zoom, and soon we'll continue meeting in person, because there is no substitute for that. But going back to intellectual well-being, introduce twice a week. Watch a TED lecture, or listen to a podcast, or do something or listen to something, or learn something that is interesting to you. It will not just make you happier, it will actually help you live longer. So that's intellectual well-being. When it comes to relational well-being, one of the best ways to cultivate relational well-being, to cultivate relationships in general, and to increase levels of happiness is through acts of kindness. To give is to receive. And acts of kindness or generosity or listening or giving charity, whatever it is, by doing it consistently. Again, commit to 2 extra acts of kindness a week. That can go a long way towards not just helping you become happier, but also a better person. And finally, emotional well-being. Here it's important to embrace, accept emotional pain. So write about painful experiences, shed a tear or two. That contributes to physical and emotional well-being. Talk about painful emotions. And in order to cultivate more pleasurable emotions, do what Oprah has been telling us to do for so many years. Keep a gratitude journal. Even if you write in it once a week, that can go a long way in helping strengthening our immune system, helping us to become kinder, as well as increasing happiness levels and success. All because we express gratitude. My favorite word in English is appreciate. The word appreciate has 2 meanings. The first meaning of the word appreciate is to say thank you, to express gratitude. The second meaning of the word appreciate is to grow in value. Money appreciates in the bank, or the economy appreciates. And the 2 meanings are connected, because when you appreciate the good appreciates. When you appreciate the good things in your life rather than take them for granted, you create more goodness.
I love that. Pushing so much energy towards what you want to grow when you're grateful. Well, I know how I'm going to attack my SPIRE first and foremost is going to be with the intellectual, with the Happiness Studies Academy. And I'm going to make my husband take it with me, because as parents, I don't want to be checking my child's report card, and I don't want to be keeping them from falling. I want Superman to fall through the elevator shaft, and I want to take that moment and not steal that opportunity for my children to learn how to go through loss. Tal, this was so powerful. I cannot thank you enough for your time and for putting so much energy and effort into creating courses and writing books that really can change people's lives.
Oh, thank you very much, Kelly, for doing the important work that you do.
Where can people follow along? Where can they take the course? Where can they learn more?
Going on our website, it's Happiness Studies. That's 3 S's, happinessstudies.academy. That's where there's information on lectures and on certificate programs. And soon we'll also have a master's degree in happiness studies that people will be able to enroll in.
Wow, that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, we will link to everything in the show notes and put all of your fun acronyms in there as well, so that people can follow along. We all just want the rituals. So whatever it takes to get there. And, if that means reminders, repetition, then we'll get those done too.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you for listening to Be Well by Kelly. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more at bewellbykelly.com and follow me on Instagram at bewellbykelly. I would love if you picked up my books, Body Love and Body Love Every Day. They're sold on Amazon and at all major booksellers.